So this will be a bonus video. Get this stuff out of the way. If you've already seen the other videos, good. If not, go back. You've learned what your last strong finger is and your first weak finger is. You've learned how to calibrate on your last strong finger, what it feels like when it stays strong, and what it feels like when it goes weak. And on your first weak finger, you've calibrated and felt like what it's like when it goes strong or when it stays weak. You've learned how to test if your body needs insulin versus sugar. You've learned how to count what score you get from an insulin dose. This dose makes me +2. This dose makes me +3, but the correct dose makes me +4. You've learned how to take insulin for a particular food. I've held the banana in my field. Right now, if I do that again, if I take, what is this? That's +3. If I add just a little bit more, hold hand over the banana, focus on the banana, then hold my hand over my insulin, which I'll put here. And that makes it go +3 again, but somewhere in there I'll find a +4 for the absolute best. If you have a question, place them in the comments to this video, and I'll get back with most likely a video response, unless it's something simple. So if you're like, I can't figure out which is my last strong finger and my first weak finger, if you ask a specific question, if you ask like a question, can I do this, and it's something not related to the stuff in this class, then I might just say no. But if it pertains to stuff that's relevant here, I'll certainly do my best to help you. Also, and this might be preferred, on Facebook it's just a week ago, I started a holistic support group for type 1 diabetics. It's called Holistic Support Group for Type 1 Diabetics. I'll try to link in the comments, and please join us there. So, what's our bonus? Insulin is pretty high stakes. Not a great thing to learn on, the first time you have, a massive high, and you go to test it, and your body maybe you're feeling a little bit stressed and you forget to tap and make sure you're in a good place to be able to get accurate results. Maybe you're trying to cheat and you're using, wrong muscle testing systems, which are not going to work for this. You want some stuff to practice on. So let's say you go to the grocery store and you find food. I know you guys are like me and you want to have some seaweed, right? Holistic types. I can test the seaweed. And this, it sort of is dose dependent, but maybe it's not so important. I hold my hand over it, focus on it, and then I go to my last finger that was strong, but doesn't make it go weak. And I go to my first finger that was weak, +1, and then add a second finger. So this seaweed is +2. And you can play with this. If it's heated in water, it might test better. I've got a whole bunches of celery in my house. You can wonder what I'm doing. Celery. And so I'm going to hold my hand over the celery. Doesn't go weak. positive 1, positive 1, 2, positive 2. So that celery like that, positive 2. It's good. It's a good food for me. It's not like a life-saving thing. Like if you find a food that's positive 3 or 4, that's pretty good. This is coconut flour. And because there's a lot in here, I'm going to go just a little bit further away. I don't want my body to, think I'm trying to eat 2 or 3 cups of coconut flour. It doesn't go weak. Positive 1, 2, positive 1, 2. Now, there's an issue with some items you might want to test. Here's some olives. Here's an organic coconut spread, which has sugar in it. What's the problem? There's no way to test these olives. It's locked up in a metal container. So I'm actually not going to test these olives. You have to be able to see the product. Glass works fine, but whatever's inside of this can, my body can't perceive that with my whatever sensory faculty it is. I used to start muscle testing classes by taking a vial of mercury and placing it sort of within the field of somebody, if you will, within a few inches of the back of their head. And their arm would go weak. It would create a stress state. So, I wouldn't test things that are in cans, boxes, like pretty much no in boxes. So that is a limit, if something's wrapped up in a metal bag. So this one I could test, but actually it's ideal if I open it. So there's kind of a limit. Doesn't go weak, doesn't go strong. Glad we had one that was like this. That is called neutral. Neither good nor bad. Let's see here. That goes weak, -1. This is wheat bran. And of course, we should know where we're at with gluten. So I've got cracker here, which is a European type. Doesn't go negative or positive. So this is neutral, at least for me right now. What would be a good example? So if I go to the store, and I guess I'll use crackers. I found these crackers and they didn't test bad for me. Let's say there's 30 or 50 crackers in the store. There might only be one that tests fine. I might go and 1 week Napa cabbages test positive, and the next week they do not test positive. What happened? There could have been somebody who coughed on them. They could be from a different farm, and there's cadmium on them because the other farm is closer to a road. You just never know. And so, whereas we, just like with insulin, I was sort of describing in the first video that carb counting is a little bit insufficient to deal with the quandary, complicated details. We have the same issue with food. There's no way to get there through the label of saying this is going to be good and this is going to be bad. So for those who don't eat organic and don't care about that and think it's rubbish, you'll find that oftentimes organic tests much better. But for those of you who do eat organic, you'll be very disappointed to find that you've been often harming yourself eating supposedly healthy foods, and your body didn't like them. And so that becomes a difficult issue. You can play with that how you will, ask questions. So this is psyllium husk. +1, 2, +2. I eat that pretty regularly. Baking, I use that. So if I had never eaten psyllium husk, maybe it would test +3. Maybe, but now that I'm already using it, it's like, it's good for me, but, I don't get the kick out of it I once did. These I'm not sure if they're going to test positive. And they do, +1. These are hemp seeds. And I'm not advocating any of these foods. This is just for me. And you might have your own sort of thing going on there. If you're testing in a grocery store, again, simple suggestion, hold your hand over it, pause, and then come back and test. If you want a dose for insulin, you hold the hand over this, then over a syringe with the particular dose you want to try. If you are experimenting with dosing, I might fill up a whole bunch of syringes with 1 unit of insulin and maybe keep that in the fridge for when you want to practice testing dosing. So if you're at breakfast, you can take out that kit and test what's the impact of 1 unit, or you can count by half units or whatever. And then when you get a little bit more advanced, it's going to be pretty easy to draw out more than you need and test that, or put it down and test that, inject a little back in, eject a little back in, until you get, for some you might find that you don't get +4, you can only find +3, but until you get +3 or +4 readings. Ideally, you'd only go for the best of whatever you can get. But if you're like, hey Sam, I'm not getting +4, I'm getting +2 for most of them, and I got a +3 once, what I might say is there's a chance that you need to play more with half unit dosing. And what I might say is that's fine. Don't worry about the +4. Just do the best you can. Everybody's different. So that's the bonus video. You can also use this on things in your environment, like my cell phone tests -4 for me right now. I've been sitting in front of this for, hour and a half recording, so that's -4. I wonder if I turn the Bluetooth off, what is it? If I go to my Bluecon, hold my hand over, that's -1. Now, interestingly, if I take a supplement or something that I might think would help me with whatever this, thing stuck inside of me is doing, I might be able to find a supplement or an herb or whatever that maybe exercise. If I exercise, I do this, and then it doesn't test negative after that exercise. But I might be able to find an item that offsets the damage of this. In more complicated classes, you can see, is there an infection involved? Is it a response to EMF? What's the damage from the electromagnetic frequencies? We could get into comparing, okay, well, the Bluecon tests -1. What about Meow Meow? What about moving to Dexcom? What about, whatever else, Bubble? And so you get to play with all your little versions there. My phone that tests -4, I would switch through, put it on airplane mode. Does it still test -4? Put on Wi-Fi, goes back to -4. Shut off Wi-Fi, put on Bluetooth, goes to -2. So the Wi-Fi was causing the -4. Turn off the Wi-Fi and turn on the cell phone band, makes it go -3. So the Wi-Fi was my sensitivity. And then I have to look at the wider issue of, where else am I being exposed to the Wi-Fi? Is the smartphone the only part of the problem? And, there can be other little things there. So that's my little bonus video. You want to only eat foods that test positive for you. So let's say you learn that you're basically allergic to half or everything of what you're eating. I say good. I say good. One, I think it was Julian Whitaker, who's kind of a natural health nutritionist type guy. So, well, how do I find out what foods you're allergic to? Let me just ask you, what foods do you eat regularly? Because we acquire any food that we're eating regularly, and it's bad for us. Our response to it is gets worse and worse. So you might have only originally been, let's say, this common situation, you were living in Europe, you ate bread, there's no problem. When we test European, back then, the European bread tested like kind of neutral. When you came to America, let's say before you had a bite of American bread, it tested -2, like definitely negative. But then you ate that American bread and it made you really sick. And then we tested it for you the next day. What's it going to test? It's going to be -4, because your body not only had a problem with it, but it acquired an additional response. So, like, for example, eggs. Many people become allergic to eggs. If you eat eggs every day for 6 months or so, a certain percentage of people will have a sensitivity to eggs, if they do that. So they acquire that sensitivity. So it's especially important to challenge yourself and say, well, I think that when I'm hungry and I'm tired and my brain's not really on and I wander into the kitchen and I end up, with the spoon and the jar of the peanut butter, and maybe that's not such a good behavior. It's a good chance that if you're feeding yourself like that, the peanut butter will start to test negative, whereas normally it would have been fine. And maybe it's just an issue that you're eating a peanut butter with sugar in it or some, whatever, the palm oil and junk like that. They all used to have or a lot of them still do, hydrogenated oils, trans fats. So, yeah, we can crave things that are actively not good for us. The autism community, where a lot of the autistic kids are especially sensitive to what they eat. Like, they want chicken nuggets, they want mozzarella sticks, they want, you know what I mean? Just cheese and bread, kind of as a rule. They're often severely allergic to those precise foods that they're craving, and the kid, has a tantrum if they can't eat that food. So, that's a little bit of what you should be working with, and just suggesting maybe challenge yourself a little bit. And then there is also good news that if you have a negative response, say to carrots, you can take a supplement like betaine HCl, like it's basically like the stomach acid replacement, betaine HCl with pepsin. Pepsin's an enzyme. Your pancreas makes enzymes to help you digest your meals. So if you take the carrots, you can see if I add betaine HCl, 1 capsules, 2 capsules, if I add 2 capsules, then the carrots don't cause a bad reaction. And that means you're not making enough enzymes, you're not making enough stomach acid. You might have a zinc issue, and it's more likely that you'll have a parasite or SIBO or some kind of bacterial a problem with your flora, your gut microbiome. So what else do I want to share? Yeah, I do encourage you to check the things in your environment. Lighting, compact fluorescents are often a problem. With foods, almonds are often a problem. Like, cashews test pretty much good. Macadamia tests pretty much good for most people. Peanuts usually test good for maybe not everybody, but I think that we've made peanuts out to be the problem, and then almonds, which accumulate, according to Dr. Omura, who's kind of nutty, who knows, his own research, but contaminated with chrysotile asbestos, a naturally occurring form of asbestos. So since I've been mentioning this to patients, a lot of people respond positively. They say, yeah, you're right. I notice that I don't really feel that good eating a bunch of almonds. So you can check out stuff like that. Cheese, dairy. I mean, when you want to test dairy for somebody and they want to eat dairy and they feel like there's nothing you can do about it, you can go through that thing oh, let me test raw milk, let me test, this type of kefir, this yogurt, this goat's, this sheep's milk yogurt, like test 15 different things. But in general, if they don't test positively for 2% organic cow's milk, they should be off dairy completely. That's generally my rule. I'm less lenient. And if somebody is saying that they can't do that, I'm also not judgmental. But I do just like to be a little bit more valid and accurate with my testing and my concern for patients. And it's probably going to be better for you to skip the dairy and skip the process of trying to eat foods that aren't that good for you just because you're craving them. I know everybody wants to say that the A1, A2 issue, the goats, dairy will be better for them, but I find that it takes at least a year off dairy before we can accurately assess that. With insulin, we also get into issues with chemicals. I do think that we all have issues with chemicals, and there's more than enough peer-reviewed research to back up my statement. Even we often think that there's not a lot of research on holistic medicine. The herb licorice alone, I like to bring up, has over 6,000 peer-reviewed studies on it. So the reason glyphosate, Roundup, was banned in Europe in the 70s was for causing cancer. And so glyphosate and exposure, which even if you're eating organic, you can still be exposed to glyphosate. They've done a couple of research studies that found glyphosate even in pretty much all organic produce. So I am a big toxicology guy, and I think that it is pertinent to the etiology of type 1 diabetes. There's other forces as well. And so, when people do really cool muscle testing, they see where in the body do you have a negative response to aluminum, to cadmium, to mercury. We test every nutrient. Does your body want selenium and all this stuff? So I'm not saying you go and become a practitioner. I just want you to be mindful that the insulin muscle testing, it's based on what the body actually wants, and it comes from a field that says the biggest human health hazards and causes of illness. The same testing showed that the biggest, health hazards and causes of illness are things like 5G, 4G, Wi-Fi, dirty electricity. These are things that consistently show up as big issues from our body's points of view. Ever since they removed lead from gasoline, there's tons of cadmium in it now. So cadmium, lead, mercury, which we have a mind-boggling amount of research on the health impacts of mercury, and we're still getting them in our fillings. So yeah, and then infections. This testing also was pretty clear that we have often subtle or undiagnosed subacute infections, long-term kind of infections, whether it's Epstein-Barr, chronic retroviruses, Lyme disease co-infections like Bartonella and Ehrlichia, and even parasites, the whole ropeworm thing, the Gubarev. So we find things that are a little bit more holistic. So rounding this out, to me, getting started, became type 1 diabetic, bad experience, couldn't make it through a class without my blood sugar going low, learned a blog about, processed food and all this stuff, got into Bernstein type stuff, but then got my master's in nutrition, and right at the end of it, I came into a class, Autonomic Response Testing. I was just really inspired. Again, what I said is, as soon as I went to this class, I realized I could test every theory that I'd spent the previous 2.5 years getting my master's degree learning about. I could test if somebody had cortisol issues, adrenal stress. I could test if they had a gluten sensitivity, and I didn't have to wait, and I didn't have to make them spend $300 or $500 on a lab to get their thyroid checked out. The thyroid is just like one of, all these different modules that might come up in a testing session. And I continually had just really good, amazing responses. I think it's the way my mind works. You know, my top feedback in my first year of practice was people telling me that they were going to fire their doctor after spending an hour and a half with me in their first session. And I'm like, you know, but time and time again, people have said this, and I'm like, you know, I'm not a doctor, I'm a nutritionist. I was like, you just told me, they would say, or I remember somebody saying, you just told me more in the last hour than I've learned in the last 3 years. So I just want to let you know what kind of community you're aligning with when you do this. And I say that also because there's a lot of bad muscle testing out there, whether it's chiropractic supplement sellers or hippies in the street, you know, doing this kind of stuff. And this isn't what we do. So you can say it's based on the Omura technique, and it's more of a scientific version. And I think that Dietrich Klinghardt, and I'm not teaching his system here, 'cause I'm not allowed to. Dietrich Klinghardt does have some peer-reviewed studies now validating the accuracy of this muscle test, this type of testing. So I think that that's beautiful, and it's been interesting to see. Uh, I I'm forgetting. I remember one that he mentioned. They had 20 practitioners or so come and test for the same thing in a group of patients, and there was a really high percentage of accuracy, you know, above any kind of chance of error. So, yeah, yeah. So if you need to know more about your muscle test for insulin protocols or strategies, if you want to learn more about practitioner level stuff and more about this type of muscle testing system, or if you'd like to be a client, we do have a free intake version where you get a map of what your health looks like and what tests you need, but the results aren't included. So it'll say like your number one issue was a food allergy, the number four issue was a hormone imbalance, whatever. And if you spend like 120 or 150 bucks, you'll get, you know, the results for all of these tests. So that one's free. It's the freefirsttest.com, which I use that to do research on different topics or themes. Yeah, hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know how it went for you. Curious about your thoughts and how I can make these better.